It was just an ordinary Tuesday night. The dishes were done. The kids were asleep. And I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through nothing in particular, when his phone buzzed on the coffee table. I wasn't trying to snoop. I want you to understand that. In 11 years of marriage, I had never once opened his phone without asking. That's just who I was. Trusting. Maybe too trusting. But that night, something made me look. Call it a wife's instinct. Call it fate. Call it the universe finally deciding I deserve the truth. The screen lit up with a name I didn't recognize. A heart emoji next to it. And a message preview that made my stomach drop to the floor. I'm not going to tell you what it said yet. Not yet. Because before I show you how my world fell apart in the space of 11 words, I need you to understand who I was before that message. I need you to understand what I built, what I trusted, and what I was about to lose. Because this isn't just a story about betrayal. This is a story about what happens when a woman who has been underestimated her entire life finally decides she has had enough. My name doesn't matter. What matters is what happened next. And by the end of this story, you'll understand why people who heard about it still talk about it to this day. Stay with me. Because this story isn't just shocking. It's a lesson every person, man or woman, needs to hear at least once in their life. Let me take you back to the beginning. Back to when I still believed I had the perfect life. My name, for this story, is Elena. And this is what happened when I found the secret texts that were never meant for my eyes. I was 36 years old, married to a man named Daniel for 11 years. We had 2 children, a boy, 8, and a girl, 5. We lived in a quiet neighborhood, the kind with clean sidewalks and neighbors who wave at you in the morning. From the outside, we looked like the family everyone wanted to be. I ran a small home-based business making custom cakes and desserts for local events. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Daniel worked as a regional manager for a logistics company. He traveled sometimes, a few nights a month, but nothing that ever felt unusual. Nothing that ever felt like a warning sign. I trusted him completely. I trusted him with my whole heart. The way you trust the person you chose to build a life with. I never checked his phone. I never questioned his late nights at the office. I never once imagined that the man sleeping beside me every night was living a second life I knew nothing about. That trust is exactly what he counted on. And that Tuesday night, when his phone buzzed and that message appeared on the screen, 11 years of trust cracked in less than 3 seconds. But to understand how deep this betrayal went, you need to understand how good things used to be. Because the fall is only as painful as the height you fell from. Daniel and I met at a mutual friend's wedding when I was 24. He made me laugh within the first 5 minutes of meeting him, and honestly, that was all it took. We dated for 2 years before he proposed on a quiet beach at sunset, and I remember thinking, this is it. This is the man I'm going to grow old with. The first few years of our marriage were simple and happy. We didn't have much money, but we had each other. We used to cook dinner together every Friday night, just the 2 of us, laughing about nothing important. When our son was born, Daniel cried in the hospital room. I had never seen him that emotional before. It made me love him even more. When our daughter came 2 years later, life got busier, but it never got harder. We had a rhythm, a system. He worked, I built my little cake business from our kitchen, and together we made it work. We weren't rich, but we were building something real. Looking back now, I realize how much I ignored the small warning signs. The way he started guarding his phone a little more carefully around year 8. The way he'd step outside to take certain calls. The way, sometimes, he'd come home smelling like a perfume that wasn't mine, and I'd convince myself it was just cologne, or maybe I was imagining things. I want to pause here and ask you something. Have you ever ignored a feeling in your gut because you were scared of what it might mean? Because that was me. For almost 3 years, some quiet part of me knew something wasn't right. But I silenced that voice every single time. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself he loved me too much to do something like that. We had built a life together. A home. 2 children who adored their father. A business that was finally starting to grow. I had too much to lose to let a little voice of doubt tear it all down. So I stayed quiet. I kept smiling. I kept believing. But deep down, some part of me was already preparing for the moment when I would have no choice but to face the truth. That moment came on an ordinary Tuesday night, when a phone buzzed on a coffee table, and a message meant for someone else appeared on the screen by mistake. I remember picking up the phone with shaking hands. I remember telling myself, it's probably nothing. It's probably a coworker. It's probably innocent. I was wrong. And what I read in the next 60 seconds would change the course of my entire life. The message on the screen read something simple. Something that, out of context, might have seemed harmless to anyone else. But I wasn't anyone else. I was his wife of 11 years, and I knew exactly what that tone meant. It was intimate, familiar, the kind of message you send to someone you've spoken to 100 times before, late at night, when you think no one else is watching. My hands trembled as I unlocked the phone using the passcode I had seen him type 1,000 times over the years, his mother's birthday. He never thought I'd remembered it. He never thought I'd need to use it. What I found inside that conversation thread made the room around me spin. Months of messages. Not days. Not weeks. Months. Sweet nothings. Plans to meet. Photos I wish I could unsee. And worst of all, dates. Dates that matched exactly with nights he told me he was working late or stuck in a meeting that ran long. I sat frozen on that couch for what felt like hours, though it was probably only minutes. My mind was racing through every excuse he had ever given me. Every late night. Every "sorry babe" meeting ran over. Every single lie, laid out now like puzzle pieces finally clicking into a picture I never wanted to see. I heard him coming down the stairs. I quickly placed the phone back exactly where it had been, screen down, just as it was before. My heart was pounding so hard I thought he might hear it. "Everything okay?" he asked, grabbing a glass of water from the kitchen. "Yeah," I said, my voice somehow steady despite the storm raging inside me. "Just tired." He kissed my forehead and went back upstairs like nothing in the world was wrong. Like he hadn't just shattered everything we built together. Like the woman sitting on that couch wasn't holding the pieces of her entire life in her shaking hands. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay next to him, listening to him breathe peacefully, while my mind replayed every single lie from the last few years. I thought about our children upstairs, sleeping soundly, completely unaware that their world was about to change forever. I want you to sit with that feeling for a moment. The feeling of lying next to someone you love, knowing something they don't know you know. The feeling of holding a secret so heavy it feels like it might crush you before morning even comes. But here's what I decided in the dark hours of that sleepless night. I decided I wasn't going to fall apart. Not yet. Not until I understood exactly what I was dealing with. Because if he had been lying to me for months, I needed proof. Real proof. Enough proof that he could never talk his way out of it. So instead of confronting him that night, I made a decision that would change everything. I decided to watch, to wait, and to plan. Over the next 2 weeks, I became someone I never thought I would be. Careful, quiet, watching. I started paying attention to details I had ignored for years. The way he'd glance at his phone during dinner and quickly put it face down. The way he'd take showers as soon as he got home from work, something he rarely used to do. The way he'd sometimes step into the garage to take calls, closing the door behind him. I didn't confront him. Not yet. Instead, I gathered information the way a detective gathers evidence for a case that has to be airtight. I found an old tablet in our closet that was still linked to his messaging account from years ago, back when we used to share devices for convenience. He had forgotten it existed. Through it, I could see message previews without ever touching his phone. What I discovered over those 2 weeks broke something in me that I don't think will ever fully heal. The woman's name was Priya. She worked at a company Daniel dealt with through his job. Their messages went back almost a year. A full year of secret conversations, secret meetings, secret plans, while I was at home raising our children, running my little cake business, and believing every single excuse he gave me. I learned that the business trip 3 months earlier, the one where he brought me back a small souvenir and told me how much he missed me, was actually a weekend getaway with her. I learned that some of the money missing from our joint savings account, money I had questioned him about, money he told me was for a work investment, had actually gone toward a hotel and gifts for another woman. I want to be honest with you. There were nights during those 2 weeks where I cried so hard in the shower that I thought I might drown in my own grief. There were nights where I wanted to scream at him, to throw every plate in our kitchen, to demand he explain how he could look our children in the eyes every morning while living this double life. But I didn't, because somewhere in the middle of my heartbreak, a different feeling started to grow. Not just sadness, something sharper, something clearer. I realized that Daniel wasn't just betraying me. He was betraying our children too. Every single time he chose to lie instead of come home to us honestly. He was risking everything we built. Our home, our family, our future, for secret meetings and midnight messages. And I realized something else. If he thought he could do this and simply walk away unscathed whenever he got tired of his secret life, he was wrong. I wasn't going to be the woman who found out and quietly accepted it. I wasn't going to be the woman who begged him to stay, who blamed herself, who wondered what she did wrong. I was going to make sure that when the truth came out, it came out exactly the way I wanted it to. On my terms. At my time. With every piece of evidence laid out so perfectly that he would have nowhere left to hide. That's when I stopped just watching. And I started planning. There is a moment in every betrayal story where the person who was hurt has a choice to make. Stay silent and small, or stand up and reclaim their power. I chose the second option, and I want to tell you exactly how I got there. One night, after the kids were asleep, I sat alone in my small home office, the same room where I designed cake orders and planned birthday parties for other families. I opened a blank notebook and wrote down everything I knew. Every date, every lie, every excuse he had given me that now made perfect sense in the worst way possible. As I wrote, something inside me shifted. The grief was still there, but it was no longer the only thing I felt. Anger rose up beside it, strong and steady, like a fire that refused to go out. I thought about the years I had spent supporting Daniel's career, staying up late helping him prepare for big presentations, managing our home so he could focus on work, believing in him when he doubted himself. I thought about how loyal I had been, how much I had given, and I thought about how he had repaid that loyalty with secrets and lies. I made a decision that night. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to cry in front of him and beg for answers. I wasn't going to let him see how broken I was inside. Instead, I decided I would gather absolute, undeniable proof, secure my own financial safety, protect my children, and then reveal everything in a way that would leave him with no room to twist the story in his favor. This wasn't about revenge for the sake of revenge. I want to be clear about that. This was about justice, about making sure the truth came out fully and that I was protected, emotionally, financially, and legally, before that truth exploded into our lives. Over the following weeks, I quietly consulted a lawyer during my lunch breaks, using a friend's office as cover. I learned about my rights, about how joint finances worked, about what steps I needed to take to protect myself and my children before confronting Daniel. I also began saving copies of every message, every photo, every piece of evidence I had gathered, storing them safely in a place he would never think to look. A private email account he didn't know existed, backed up in 3 different places, just in case. I continued to smile at breakfast. I continued to kiss him goodbye in the mornings. I continued to play the role of the unsuspecting wife, all while quietly building the case that would finally set me free. Some people might say that was cruel, playing along while planning my next move. But I say this. For over a year, Daniel had shown me exactly how good he was at wearing a mask. I simply learned to wear one too, for the short time I needed it, so that when I finally took it off, I would be the one standing strong. And the day I chose to reveal everything wasn't far away. I knew that confronting Daniel directly, alone, in our home, would give him the chance to manipulate the conversation. Men like Daniel are skilled at twisting stories, making excuses, turning tears into sympathy. I had seen him do it before, in smaller ways, throughout our marriage. I wasn't going to give him that chance this time. So I built a plan. A quiet, careful plan designed to reveal the truth in a way he could never escape from. First, I contacted his sister, Marissa, someone I had always been close to. Not to gossip, but because I knew Marissa valued honesty above almost anything else. I showed her the evidence, carefully, privately, giving her time to process what she was seeing. She was devastated, but she believed me completely, because the proof left no room for doubt. Second, I reached out to Priya's husband. I want to pause here, because I know this part might surprise you. I found out, through my research, that Priya was also married, to a man who had no idea what was happening either. I wrestled with this decision for days. Was it my place to tell him? But in the end, I decided that he deserved the same truth I was demanding for myself. He deserved to make his own informed choice about his life and his marriage. Third, I planned a dinner. Daniel's birthday was coming up in 3 weeks, and every year, we hosted a small family gathering, his parents, his sister, a few close friends. This year, I decided, would be different. This year, the dinner would become the moment the truth finally came out, in front of the people who mattered most, in a setting where Daniel could not simply talk his way around it or dismiss it as my imagination. I spent those 3 weeks preparing carefully. I organized every piece of evidence into a clear, simple presentation, printed and saved securely. I finalized conversations with my lawyer, making sure my children and I would be financially protected the moment the truth came out. I even continued planning his birthday dinner as if everything were normal, choosing his favorite foods, decorating the table exactly the way I always did. Every smile I gave him during those 3 weeks cost me something. But I reminded myself, again and again, that this wasn't weakness. This was strategy. This was strength wearing a very careful disguise. The night before the dinner, I sat alone in my car outside our house for almost an hour, gathering the courage for what was about to happen. I thought about my children upstairs, sleeping peacefully, unaware that their world was about to shift. I thought about the version of myself who had ignored the warning signs for years. And I made a promise to that version of myself, that after tomorrow night, she would never have to feel small or unseen again. The next evening, family and friends arrived, laughter filling our home, candles lit on the dining table, everything appearing perfectly normal on the surface. But underneath that calm, ordinary evening, I was holding the truth in my hands, ready to set it free. Dinner went smoothly at first. Daniel's parents told old stories. His sister Marissa kept glancing at me with quiet, nervous support. Priya's husband, whom I had invited under the simple explanation that Daniel's co-worker and her spouse were joining us this year, sat near the end of the table, unaware of what was about to unfold. After the cake was served and the birthday songs faded, I stood up and gently tapped my glass with a spoon, the way you do before a toast. Before we finish tonight, I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me, I want to share something important, something that's been hard to carry alone. Daniel looked at me, confused but smiling, still completely unaware. I placed a folder on the table. Inside were printed messages, dates, photos, everything I had gathered over the past weeks. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I spoke calmly, clearly, describing what I had found, careful to keep my words simple and free of unnecessary details, focusing only on the truth. The color drained from Daniel's face as understanding crept in. He reached for the folder, stammering, trying to explain, trying to find some version of the story that would make this look smaller than it was. But then Priya's husband, sitting quietly until now, opened his own phone, revealing messages he had discovered just hours earlier, after I had reached out to him privately that morning. His voice shook with anger and heartbreak as he confirmed everything I had shared, adding pieces I hadn't even known. Details about their relationship that made it clear this wasn't a one-time mistake, but a long, deliberate betrayal. The room fell silent, the kind of silence that feels heavier than any noise ever could. Daniel's mother covered her mouth in shock. His father's expression turned from confusion to deep disappointment. Marissa reached over and took my hand under the table, a quiet gesture of support that meant more to me than words ever could. Daniel tried to speak, his voice breaking as he searched for excuses that no longer held any power. But there was nothing left to say. The evidence was there. The truth was undeniable. And for the first time in over a year, he had absolutely nowhere left to hide. I looked at him, this man I had loved for 11 years, and I felt something unexpected settle over me. Not rage, not devastation, something closer to peace. Because finally, after months of carrying this secret alone, the truth was no longer mine to hold in silence. It belonged to everyone at that table now. And with it, so did the consequences. I'm not doing this to destroy you in front of everyone, I said quietly, my voice steady. I'm doing this because I refuse to carry your secrets anymore. You made your choices. Now it's time you faced them, honestly, in front of the people who trusted you. Daniel had no response. For the first time in our entire relationship, the man who always had an excuse, always had a story, always had a way to smooth things over, simply had nothing left to say. The weeks that followed that dinner were some of the hardest of my life, but also some of the most freeing. Daniel moved out within days. There were difficult conversations, painful moments, and moments where I questioned everything about the 11 years we had shared. But throughout it all, I stayed grounded in the decision I had made that sleepless night weeks earlier. I would protect myself, and I would protect my children, no matter what came next. The divorce process, thanks to the careful preparation I had done in advance, moved forward with far less difficulty than it could have. Because I had protected our joint finances early, because I had documentation, because I had already consulted with a lawyer who understood exactly what I needed, I was able to secure a fair and stable future for myself and my children. Daniel's family, especially his sister Marissa, stood firmly by my side throughout the process, something I will always be grateful for. Priya's marriage, from what I later heard, ended as well, the truth proving too heavy for that relationship to survive either. As for me, something unexpected happened in the months that followed. My small cake business, the one I had built quietly from our kitchen table, began to grow. Word spread about my story, not through gossip, but through the quiet respect people had for a woman who had faced betrayal with strength instead of bitterness. Local clients began requesting my desserts for their own family celebrations, drawn not just to the cakes, but to the story of resilience behind them. My children, though it was difficult for them at first, adjusted with the kind of resilience children often surprise us with. I made sure to shield them from the harshest details, focusing instead on reassuring them that both their parents loved them deeply, even if our family looked different now. A year after that birthday dinner, I stood in my own kitchen, running a business that was finally thriving, raising 2 children who were happy and secure, standing on my own 2 feet in a way I hadn't fully realized I was capable of. I won't pretend the pain disappeared completely. Betrayal like that leaves a mark that doesn't fully fade. But I learned something important through it all. I learned that strength doesn't always look like screaming or breaking down. Sometimes, strength looks like quiet patience, careful preparation, and the courage to face the truth, even when it's the hardest thing you'll ever do. If there's one thing I want you to take from my story, it's this. Trust is precious, but it should never be blind. Loving someone deeply doesn't mean ignoring the quiet voice inside you that senses something is wrong. That voice exists to protect you. Listen to it. I also want you to understand something about revenge, or what some people might call revenge. True justice isn't about destroying someone out of anger. It's about refusing to let someone else's choices define your worth. It's about protecting yourself, your children, and your future with clear eyes and a steady heart, even when your world is falling apart around you. Daniel made his choices. I couldn't control that. What I could control was how I responded, with patience instead of panic, with preparation instead of desperation, and with quiet strength instead of public shame. To anyone listening who has faced betrayal, whether from a partner, a friend, or someone you trusted deeply, I want you to know this. You are not weak for trusting someone. You are not foolish for believing in love. And you are not alone if you've ever found yourself sitting in silence, holding a truth too painful to speak out loud. But I also want you to know that you have more strength inside you than you realize. The same strength that got me through those sleepless nights, through those weeks of careful planning, through that dinner table where I finally set the truth free. That same strength lives inside you too. Betrayal doesn't have to be the end of your story. Sometimes, it's simply the painful chapter that leads you to discover exactly how strong, how capable, and how deserving of respect you truly are. If this story moved you, if it made you feel something, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And remember, no matter how deep the betrayal, no matter how dark the night feels, the truth always finds its way into the light. And when it does, may you be standing tall, ready to reclaim your life on your own terms. Thank you for listening. And until next time, take care of your heart, and never be afraid to listen to it.